Good evening, everyone. This is Nathan Hayes with Prima. Thank you for joining us tonight for a fantastic webinar on scribes and supertext for clinical efficiency. Dr. Gailmard is going to be getting started in just a moment, but for those of you who haven't joined us before, if you have questions along the way, just use the question section on your GoToWebinar panel, and I will be moderating the question and answer section after about 40 minutes of content. So without further ado, I will hand it off to Dr. Gailmard, and again, thank you for joining us.
Hello, everyone. Thanks a lot for joining us, and it's a pleasure to be with you this evening for this webinar on scribes and supertexts for maximum clinical efficiency. I think most of you know me, but in case you don't, or for those of you who don't, I am president and co-founder of Prima. I'm also, I own and operate a practice in Munster, Indiana, along with my wife, who's an optometrist as well, and she and I own the practice, and we employ 3 outstanding full-time optometrists who see most of the patients in our practice, and we employ about 30 staff members. I've been teaching practice management at optometry schools most of my career, including many years at ICO. My hometown and my practice is very near Chicago. But the last 5 years I've helped out in the practice management course at UC Berkeley, and I have a home here in the San Francisco area. In fact, I'm talking to you from my home office in Walnut Creek, California. It's still daylight here. It's about 5 o'clock. And so, happy to talk with you about this very fun topic that I enjoy on scribes and supertext and delegation. As Nathan said, please use the text feature. That's one of the benefits of you being here live with this for this webinar. So I greatly appreciate the questions. Don't hesitate. Don't be shy. Just text in a question anytime you want to, and we'll get to them at the end. Tonight's webinar is a member-only event. We had about 52 members registered for this webinar, and I appreciate you signing on live to be part of it. We do record the webinars, and they'll be available on the Prima website sometime probably tomorrow or the next day. And this one will be along with all the other webinars we do. If we don't get a chance to answer your questions, as always, you're a Prima member, you have immediate access to me at any time. Just email me at the email address shown on the screen. Okay, so let's jump in, and really before we get into scribes and supertexts, I want to talk a little bit about delegation, because really scribes and scribing is an advanced form of delegation. So I'd like you to review your current delegation plan, your current procedures with delegation in your practice, and review it and see if you're doing it well, and see if you're delegating as much as possible. And you know, delegation is one of the most powerful practice building strategies there is. It's helped me build my practice. I highly recommend it. And before jumping right into scribes, think about all the other things that you could delegate. Some of that is dependent on how big your staff is. But you have a remarkable amount of control on when you delegate and when you change your office procedures. So I'm going to encourage you to delegate more proactively and earlier. So let's talk about that a little bit first. I think delegation in optometry, compared to other medical specialties and healthcare professions, is lagging behind. And there's various reasons, and I look at why our colleagues are slow to delegate and come up with some of the reasons, most of which I call excuses or myths for not delegating, and see if any of these ring true. See if you can look within and see if possibly there are some reasons in here that you could overcome your tendency to not delegate as much as you should. One of them is, I think doctors sometimes think that their patients only want them to do things, that the patients may want more doctor time. And, you know, as I said, all of these that I'm presenting right now are, in my opinion, myths, and you can overcome them. I think that patients today are quite accustomed to healthcare technicians, nurses, other healthcare personnel working with doctors, and they value all of that. And it's quite impressive to patients, really. And so you'd be surprised how easily you can change a practice, even if it was built on the doctor doing most things. It's fairly easy, and patients are well accepting. Some reasons for not delegating involve staff, maybe feeling like they can't afford, doctors may feel they can't afford more staff, maybe they can't find good staff, maybe more, staff are just more challenges and more difficult and a lot more to manage. I think those are all not true. As far as the affording of staff, we'll touch on that a little later, but really, many times when you hire more staff, production goes up more than the cost. So all of these things, staff can certainly be challenging, but it's a key ingredient to a larger, more successful practice, and I encourage you to make a goal to hire more staff and to grow your staff. Maybe there's a thought that the technician can't do it as well as the doctor. I haven't found that to be true. Technicians with data collection can be trained to do a very good job, and in many cases the instrument's going to do a good deal of some of the data collection that we do. Maybe there's a tendency to feel like I don't want to work faster, I don't want to work harder. We can overcome all of these myths. Maybe there's the cost of the equipment to do more pre-testing and more delegation. Again, that's an investment that will pay back. And the high-tech equipment, is a very good investment in your practice, and it differentiates your practice from others. So probably not one that I would go on with. I practice in a state that doesn't allow delegation. We certainly have to be concerned and aware of our state law and practice within that, but the type of delegation that I'm talking about is permitted in all 50 states in the United States, and I would say that we can overcome that one. Net income is what really counts, not the gross, maybe with an effort to say that I like a smaller practice, or I like having my practice where the doctor does most things. But I would counter that by saying gross income creates greater net income. So if we grow the gross, we'll grow the net. We don't want it to feel like an assembly line, but really that's a myth too. It doesn't. I can tell you from my own practice where I do a lot of delegation to staff, patients are very impressed. We get very high marks, very excellent surveys, excellent reviews. You can delegate to a high degree and still maintain the personal touch and the caring environment. And finally, I don't have the physical space in my office to handle more patient volume and to delegate and to have more staff. And that one is valid. I would say maybe consider moving then, because we don't want your physical space to slow down your growth, and it truly can. So that one's valid, but we should be able to overcome that as well. So really, when we talk about delegation, can we just agree, first of all, that the goal is to see more patients per day? And I'll always add in without stress, because we tend to get, staff tend to think, and doctors tend to think, I'm going to see more patients per day, it's going to be stressful. And it really doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be at all. It just depends on how you set it up and how your flow goes. But seeing more patients per day is a fact of life for us. We're being led to it, or it's being pushed upon us by the economics of eye care today. And we don't maybe like that, but it is the way. It's a very key way to increasing your gross revenue and your profit. Vision plans are part of that economic structure in eye care today, whether we like them or not. We really can reinvent and re-engineer how we provide quality eye care, being more efficient and still doing a great job. So how many patients per day should we project, and should we set for a goal? I think 25 patients per OD in a typical 8-hour day is a good goal, or maybe that's a 9-hour day with an hour lunch. 22 is a good number, 23 is a good number, but I think we need to be in that range. That's the number I'd like you to think about. When I talk about patients per day, I'm referring to a mixture of types of eye exams. In my practice, about 3/4 of the patients we see are comprehensive eye exams. Maybe about 1/4 of them, maybe a little more than 1/4 of the daily visits are what we would call follow-ups, office visits, progress checks, whatever you may call them. And they still produce revenue, but they're not as complete or comprehensive an exam as a comprehensive. I'll be quick to add that in my experience, seeing 25 patients per day is no more work for the doctor than seeing 15 if you have a good staff, and if you have enough staff, and if you delegate well. So it doesn't have to be more work. In many ways, by seeing more patients and doing the really more doctor-oriented services and procedures, and less of the repetitious work of collecting data, your day could be more enjoyable. Seeing 25 per day is quite easy. It's about one patient every 15 to 20 minutes. And there should be it should be in a way that you have some time in between the patients. You're not running behind. You're not behind schedule. So that's a great goal, but what if you don't have enough patient demand to fill 25 patients per day? You know, what then? And that's an excellent point, and one then I would say we need to work on that. We need to work on the patient demand in your practice. Maybe by delegating more, we can create time for you to work on practice management, marketing, staff training, and other things, and you can build the demand. You'll have more time to build the demand. So that brings the question up, should you delegate more, even if you're not all that busy, even if you don't have enough patient demand right now? And I strongly encourage you to do that, to yes, do delegate more, even if you don't mean to. And to some of that, I use the phrase, act as you mean to go, which means make your practice look like the way you want it to become. Run your practice now the way you want it to be. Consider the non-clinical use of your time. All of your time shouldn't be spent on patient care, but you own and operate a business. And even with a good office manager, it requires you, the owner, the doctor, the leader, to have a vision for your practice and to lead it. So I strongly recommend we delegate more of the patient care, see them in smaller sections of the week, compress the patients you have now, even if you don't have enough, into fewer days, and then spend more days on the business. This is a picture of my office in Munster, Indiana. I followed exactly those principles I just outlined, and delegation's a big factor in how I built my practice. I'm going to share with you tonight some of the procedures we follow at Gailmard Eye Center and how we see 22 to 25 patients per doctor per day. And so there's many days we have 3 doctors all at once, and we'll see roughly 70, 75 patients exams on that day. And the other thing, of course, that builds practices, delegation is a big one, and excellent customer service and on the customer side of things is very important. Okay, so can exams be thorough and quick? They can. Of course they can. We need technicians to delegate to and automated instrumentation, and that allows the doctor to not be rushed. It is kind of an art, and you get good at it, but it's very possible for an optometrist to spend 15 minutes with a patient and feel like they have all the time in the world. And I'll just add on that who says patients want eye exams to take a long time? In fact, they don't, really. They'd like to get on with their day. So we can decrease data collection and spend more time on the patient's needs. We may need to change your exam paradigm, what you did when you first got out of school or how you were trained in school. Find ways to shorten your tests, speed up tests, delegate some tests, just eliminate tests. And I'll also add that as we look at your efficiency, we really need you to have 2 exam rooms per working doctor. So if you have some days where there's 2 doctors, we need 4 exam rooms as a minimum. And the goal, that's the only way to be efficient, is to have your staff preparing patients in the other exam room while you're examining a patient. We'll also need pre-test rooms usually multiple ones, especially if you get into 2 or more doctors, especially more than 2 doctors, but whether you might need to duplicate some of your pre-test instruments or have some other rooms for some of the special testing instruments, the retinal camera or the optomat or perhaps other instruments. We'll get into a little bit of that. So I'm encouraging you to take a step up on the delegation scale. Attending this webinar tonight, all of you have various practices for delegation. And we all, even if you're fairly advanced in delegation, there's probably some new additional things you can delegate. And if you're fairly basic on delegation, begin to look at these things as possible indicators of how well you're delegating. Pre-testing is kind of the classic one. I'll especially draw out tonometry, which we want to think about routine tonometry, where perhaps a technician can do that for you on every patient. Taking visual acuity, taking case history, inserting trial contact lenses. And then we get into the more advanced delegation of scribing and technician refraction, which technician refractions are not for everybody. Everybody has different opinions on that one, but it's a form of data collection. I'll mention that when you have your pre-test room, that it can be a common place for a bottleneck, for a restriction of flow. And you should analyze if that's happening and train your staff on how to avoid that bottleneck, some of which is just advising them about the issue and training them to not do the personal chit-chat with the patient in that room. We encourage chit-chat with patients. I think it's great when technicians can do some of that. It may even take some of that burden off the doctor because that personal touch is so important. But we prefer them to do it in one of the exam rooms. The technicians are going to move from the pre-test room into an exam room. And they have more time in the exam room. We have limited resources in that pre-test room, and we need to get the patient in and out. So we train the technicians to say in a nice way, we don't do case history in there. We're not going to do visual acuity in there. We're going to try to make contact lens handling minimal. In our office, we don't even record much into the EHR record in the pre-test room. We record it on a little pre-test sheet, a worksheet, and we enter that data later while the technician's waiting for the doctor. We duplicate inexpensive items, color vision charts and stereopsis and blood pressure, and those are in the exam rooms for the technician. This is, in my practice, our typical pre-test workup. The technician collects a lot of data. I won't go over it in great detail. We're going to try to just save some time this evening, but these are all good. I will mention we also have an eye care tonometer, and if you don't like an air puff, then the eye care is a great alternative to letting you do tonometry via technicians. So a lot of good data when you first walk in the room. I wanted to bring up a little side note that I often talk about, and I like. It's just a little, if you're having staff do case history, and by the way, case history is one of the important tests that we should do in addition to all of these tests, where case history is on our list there on the left side. And I think the optometrist needs to review the case history and kind of understand the patient, and that it's a very important thing that we do, but the technician can gather a lot of it and should be doing most of it, and then the doctor reviews it. But in the case history, we like to have a little place on the exam form or in the EHR that says, the technician asks the patient, are you planning to get new glasses today? And having that staff ask that question up front makes the exam go faster, it makes it easier, and your optical sales will increase because a lot of people say yes. So it's kind of ironic, really, that we're optometrists and we may be so focused on the medical aspect of eye care and the chief complaint and the, all the things that we need and the billing and coding aspects that we forget to ask that basic question. And I can assure you when patients say yes to my technician about, yes, I'm planning to get new glasses today, they do get the glasses today. I mean, we make sure of that. So let's make sure we ask that. So let's get into scribes, scribing and supertext. I'm really pleased to see scribing is really gaining popularity among optometrists. I've been doing scribing in my practice for about 30 years, and I started lecturing about it. I was excited about it, writing about it in the very early days, and it didn't get any traction. I mean, a little bit here and there, but I found ophthalmology was using it widely, and optometrists hardly ever did. But finally now, mostly due to the advent of electronic health records systems, that's pushed us into using scribes. And anyway, for whatever the reason, and EHR is a great reason to use scribes, but there are a lot more very good reasons. I first learned about scribing in my practice early in my career. I spent a day observing an ophthalmologist friend of mine and local ophthalmologist to my area, and I was super impressed when I saw him using a scribe, and that technician coming in and out of the room very quietly, but anticipating what he needed. Anyway, it was very impressive, and we've been doing it ever since, and I've provided for my associate doctors, and it's very practical. You might think it's not affordable, but it helped us become far more efficient. It's more affordable than you might think. So scribes and EHR might be the reason that you're looking at scribes, but you'll find many more benefits. However, let's admit, EHR is a major one because so many of us now spend so much time looking at the record, looking at the computer monitor, typing and clicking, and really kind of ignoring the patient. And so I know that you're here tonight because you want to make that move and or improve that in your practice, and so it's a great reason, and it allows you to spend direct time one-on-one with your patient. So that's a great reason. It also just is a great delegation tool to save time. When you don't have to click or write or do any kind of recording, you save a huge amount of time. Just think about how much time you spend now on your records, whether they're paper or EHR. My staff does all of that entry, and the doctors just do a fairly brief review of the record before finalizing the EHR. Even fees are entered by the technician scribe. The coding is done by the scribe. Everything is done by the scribe. The recall dates, everything that we need to do, the scribe's doing it. My records are more complete because they have more time to free text, free type, free form enter data, and when I was doing it, I would overlook things and forget things. Patients are impressed by the process of having the scribe in the room. Very impressive. Hearing some of the data that I'm collecting in my exam and speaking the medical terminology out loud, it's impressive to the patient. The technician's available to get something or to fix something or to take the eyeglasses that need something done to them or to go get the chart or of somebody else or a letter from a physician or another instrument that we keep somewhere else, or even to go get a parent or a loved one and bring them back. There's so much efficiency gained by having that person in the room with you. In our office, it's typical that the doctor is going to leave the exam room first. We control the time. There's very good ways you can begin to close the visit when a patient is overly talkative and let the technician finish. Other benefits of scribing, at least depending on how you scribe, is we make it into this super tech concept, and then we don't really have a handoff. The only thing better, in my view, of a good patient handoff to an optician is no handoff, is having the optician in the exam room hearing me consult with the patient one-on-one firsthand, and then carrying out the frame selection and the optical order. This allows us to retain more eyeglass sales because it doesn't give the patient an opportunity really as easy of an opportunity to take their prescription out. It's a seamless flow from the exam room to the optical because the technician in the exam room with me, who's a scribe, is also an optician. And I'm going to get into that in more detail in just a minute. But having that technician be the optician and just walk the patient into optical and carry out what we've discussed is fantastic. and patients like it. And furthermore, we're saving a lot of time by me, the doctor, not having to walk patients out of my exam room or back into the exam room or out to optical. Before we started scribing, I used to walk a patient out and try to turn it over to an optician, but there wouldn't be any optician available. And they were all busy or they weren't around. And so it was a problem. I would usually have the patient browse and I'd hope someone would take care of them. I'd have to get back because I had patients waiting. Sometimes I'd start the patient myself, but it wasn't good because there wasn't someone always available. So there's 3 ways to approach scribing. Let's kind of go over them. And you may even want to, as you move into scribing, do these in various simple ways. In fact, maybe taking from one step to the next is one possible way. But one method is to just have a scribe assigned to the doctor. And if you have 2 doctors, then each doctor would have his or her scribe for the day. And that scribe does not necessarily have to be a technician. I would say the person needs to be fast on data entry and know medical terminology, have an understanding of medical terminology. But other than that, the scribe would learn the doctor's habits and techniques and what gets recorded. The second way that you could approach scribing is to have the scribe also be a clinical technician, also be the pretester. So it's 2 in 1, really. And the third way is what I call the super tech concept, and that's what I do when we do in my practice. And it's really a 3 in 1 job description role. It's one technician stays with the patient throughout their entire visit at the practice, and the scribe is also the pretester who is also the optician. So they're cross-trained for all 3 of those duties. We're going to talk about whether or not, how do you make that transition, and it can be a little difficult in some practices, but in our practice, it isn't even thought of. It's just business as usual. Nobody thinks it's unusual at all. I realize that it's not the most common method of setting up a practice, but in our office, it's become the norm, and it can easily become the norm. We'll talk more about how to train your staff and how to make that transition if you want to. It's not for every practice. I never make the case that you have to do it a certain way or you have to do it the way I do. Just to review, the first 2 methods of scribes would still use a traditional handoff. There would be a separate optician staff, maybe 1, maybe 2, whatever size of your practice needs. And the technician or the scribe would walk the patient to optical and hand them off and come back and get the next patient. How many of these do you need to make it work depends on the role. I'm going to get to that in just a minute. The last method, the super tech method, obviously there is no handoff. I should say there usually isn't a handoff, although let me go on and describe a little bit more about my practice and how we do it. So the super tech model, high level of cross-training, pretester equals scribe equal optician. We have a group of these super techs in the practice who go wherever they are needed, which is a big advantage. It's great for the service we offer because I don't just have 1 or 2 opticians. I have a lot of them in place. I try to have 3 of these super techs per working doctor. So that's a lot of them. Now, some of that depends on how busy your practice is. And if you're seeing 22 to 25 patients a day per doctor, 3 tech, and if you have it the way I have it, it works out well because these technicians are not just clinical. They're also opticians. And sometimes we get busy in optical, and they'll just be called over to take care of a walk-in, a dispensing, an adjustment, a repair, a frame selection, whatever there may be. These technicians do optical work. It can be a big cultural shift for many practices. We'll get into more of that. Let me see. I should say, I will say it later, but I'll say it now as we get back here. In addition to these 3 technicians per working doctor, I have 2 full-time and 1 part-time master opticians, I'll call them, who only stay on the optical floor. It's just what we found worked in our practice. So as you're putting together these numbers, realized that I also have 2.5 opticians who do not go into clinic and do not tech, and they're not super techs. They're just traditional opticians. It's because we're busy enough that we need somebody always on the floor. And I should say, if we get really busy in the clinic, we can go into handoff mode. And the managers will tell the techs, we're in handoff mode, and there's a couple times during the week, evenings, we're always in handoff mode. And when the techs walk out there, they do a handoff so they can come back and help out with the clinic side. But this is the beauty of it. I have the ability to shift people where I need them and put them where we need them, because sometimes the clinic's real busy, sometimes the optical's real busy. Okay, more about that a little later. This is an innovative system. The patient is never left alone. It's great customer service. It's kind of a bonding experience with one of the technicians. And I will say that in this system, instead of doctors paging opticians or paging technicians to come help them, we use a system where the technicians page the doctors. When the technician's ready for a doctor, they'll use a silent pager. Okay, so what about this culture shock? When you go to talk to your staff about it, how do you break this new approach, and how do you get them on board with it? So I'm going to talk about change and how we bring about new concepts to the practice. But realize that in some cases, it's okay, and I've done it many times in many procedures, to put some staff into a grandfather clause and say, the existing staff doesn't have to do it that way. If there's somebody that you want to be your master optician, it could work out just fine. I think you need one or two anyway. So not everybody has to do this. Let's get that straight first. Secondly, this goes into having those opticians working on the floor at all times. So how do we do change in the practice? Well, the best way to get staff to get on board with change is to allow them to help invent the solution. Don't just dictate it. Don't just come out with an edict, from now on we're doing it this way. Let's start with a bigger statement of the problem or the goal. And what is the goal? It's to be more efficient. It's to help us see more patients per day efficiently, without stress on the staff, without stress on the doctors. And if we have to hire more staff to make this happen, we will. And we don't want you to have to just, try to identify with what are the employees worried about when you bring this change. From their point of view, what's this look like? It may look like, oh great, now I'm going to have to do all kinds of things now. The doctor's going to want us to do all the stuff she used to do. So we want to head that off by saying, we'll give you the resources, we'll hire more staff, we're going to test this, we're going to try this. Let them help even invent it, because there's only so many ways to be more efficient and to see more patients. You could even say, we're working with a consulting group and they've recommended this. This is a growing thing. Talk about EHR and how much time that takes now to put the data in. As you're doing this, staff must be open to change. It's necessary to grow the practice. And the practice has to grow. Let the staff know that's part of their job, is finding ways to help the business grow. Because if the practice doesn't grow every year, then it starts to decline because expenses go up. Payroll costs go up. Everything goes up. So we have to keep growing. You may find in this process that some staff who you thought were fantastic are not quite as great as you thought. It may be the reality that you have to face, that you thought so-and-so was great. She's not really a team player. She's not willing to get on board. Now, that doesn't mean she's not still valuable, but maybe not as valuable as you once thought. And maybe when it's time for her review in the next time that comes due, she may not get as favorable review as she usually does. So we'll just have to kind of see. But sometimes, to me, when you bring these new responsibilities and these new procedures to your staff, it's an opportunity for them to grow their own careers. To those that can embrace it and support the leadership's vision, that's an opportunity for them to expand their career. We'll have to see if they can take it or not. Hopefully you can inspire them to get on board and to take, to lead them to it. Can your practice afford scribing? Typically, productivity, sales, revenue goes up more than the cost of the staff. You do need to be fairly quick with your exams, but you want to be quick. You want to make this transition to a faster exam. Do you have enough staff? Well, the rule of thumb is one staff FTE, full-time equivalent, per $150,000 of gross revenue. So you can do the math. Figure out your FTEs. Add up all the staff hours and divide by 40. That's how many FTE you have. Also, observe your operations over about 2 weeks period of time, because that's the best way to see if you have enough staff. And we want to, have a balance between not being crazy busy and not having everyone standing around doing nothing. Sometimes we get on to either one of those a little bit, but we want to staff for the balance. Remember, hiring a new employee does 4 good things. You improve customer service. You can see why you would. More staff means better service for the patient. You can increase delegation because you would delegate more if you had someone to delegate to. You increase productivity, number of patients per day, number of glasses, number of contacts, number of medical procedures. Those things increase when you have more staff. Why? Well, mostly because when you have more staff, there's more time to sell. More time to sell more products, more time to try on a pair of contacts, more time to recommend medical care, whatever it may be. More staff means better productivity, more sales of all kinds. And you can even improve performance of existing staff because they may be stressed out if they're slightly understaffed. Or maybe they need to be challenged, and you need to change the leverage because it seems like you never have enough staff, and they know it. And you can't possibly let anybody go because you're understaffed. How much cross-training should you have? Well, it depends on the size of your practice and how many staff you have. As the practice grows, I think it's a smart thing to begin to have more departments and specialize. You have a front desk, a separate staff. In the early going, for a very small startup practice, there might only be 1 employee, and she does everything. And maybe there's 2 employees, and again, she does everything. So as you grow, I think we become a little more specialized, and that can be a good thing. But we still want cross-training. Super techs are cross-trained. We could maybe have a lab technician or a receptionist also dispense eyewear or be cross-trained. Okay, let's get into where the scribe sits and a few other points. Every exam room is different. I like to build, and I'm going to show you some pictures of some of the rooms in my office to give you some ideas of how you could have a scribe work in the area. You want to bring power and a network cable, have an electrician bring them to the area where the scribe will be. You could work on Wi-Fi, but I find a network cable is more reliable and faster. So it's just my experience. I tend to like, and we've tried tablets and iPads, and some of the newer EHRs are coming out and able to use iPads. I think that would be great. We're using 14-inch screen laptops for the scribe in most cases because we're using Exam Writer and it doesn't work very well on a tablet. So this is a typical exam room in our office, which uses stock cabinets and a stock countertop with a sink. And you can see we just built a little overhang for a stool on the end on the left-hand side for the technician to sit with a laptop. The doctor still has a larger screen. We bring up images, optomaps, photographs, topography, fields on that monitor, and the doctor could see the previous record. Here's another exam room. It had a refraction desk, and we just built and had a carpenter add on the little shelf off to the left in the same Formica material so that it matched. So that's how we do our standard rooms. We wanted to have 8 exam rooms, so we added an 8th exam room not too long ago into a very tight space. This room's only 7 feet wide by 10 feet long. And we built a narrow little refraction desk, and we made a little overhang, and the technician can still sit in there. So 7 feet wide by 10 feet long. It's about as tight of an exam room as I'd want to be in, and it's not our favorite, but it works. So scribing logistics and shortcuts, who has the active record is a thought you might want to plan for. In most of these EHR programs, only one person can be in the active record at a time, but the doctor could have a read-only record, and that's what we do. The technician brings up the last record for this patient in today's record, but it's in the read-only format. Other ways you can do is print out the last year's exam if you want that, and then destroy it. We use a pretest worksheet in two-part NCR because the doctor needs to have certain data in front of him or her while they're talking to the patient, while they're doing their exam. And some of that's in the pre-testing, it's visual acuities, it's the chief complaint, it's the medications, it's the lensometer, habitual RX. So you need those things in front of you. Figure out what's going to work for you. We use a pre-test worksheet that we eventually scan and discard at the end of the visit. That time waiting for where the tech is done, where the pre-tester is done, and we page the doctor is very valuable. We use it for imaginations. We use it for the technician to enter data. The technician can have a cheat sheet available that in case she's in the wrong part of the record when the doctor says something, there's a place to jot it down real quick. Well, how do we train technicians? We hire with the experience. We use videos. We use a senior technician showing the new hire, like shadowing, handouts. The technicians are fairly easy. Scribes, we train them. Here's how I'd recommend you train scribes. Start with your best technician and do a pilot program. See if you like scribing. See if it feels good to you. See if the technician can do it. And you don't have to do every patient. Maybe just do a few patients to start. And tell the staff this is just a test. We're going to see if this will work for us. Meet with your best technician in advance and review with her the software or the exam forms. Insert some data. Train the scribe about diagnosis codes. Maybe your EHR will bring those up automatically. In the early going, you're going to review it very closely, and you're going to learn as you go. The scribe will enter the exam fees, teach the scribe how to know what you're doing and what fees apply, and let it all be the scribe's responsibility. I prefer and recommend that the scribe be mostly quiet in the exam room when the doctor's in there. The scribe, the pre-tester, the super tech, has plenty of time to talk to the patient, but during the doctor's time, we want that to be really focused between the doctor and the patient. But the scribe should feel free to ask questions if something's missing, if there's something that we forgot, if there's something that the scribe isn't sure of or doesn't understand. Think about how does the patient feel about having a third party, a person in the room besides the doctor. Sometimes doctors worry about this, ask me about it. I've never felt at all a patient ever, and we've been doing it for 30 years with a lot of doctors and a lot of patients, feel badly or feel like intimidated or feel a lack of privacy. They're very used to a healthcare personnel assisting the doctor. And in fact, there's many times that I, as the doctor, have been very glad to have the technician in there with me because patients can be very strange. Sometimes you're in there in a situation you're not comfortable with. It's really nice to have a third party in there. And I've never found a patient feel badly about it. Think about and realize that you have control over what you say out loud. If you are seeing something really bad in the patient's eye, you don't have to say everything out loud at that moment. You may want to wait until you're ready to talk to the patient about it. You may need to do some more tests before you can confirm what this is. You don't have to say anything. The patient will never know what you're saying and what you're not saying. And furthermore, it's perfectly normal for you to still record some data. If there's something too advanced for this technician you happen to have with you, and you may end up with a variety of technicians, some high level, some not. Knowing that, you could just go over and record some notes yourself, whether they be handwritten, whether you pull the laptop towards you and type in something, whether you make a drawing, it's all fine. The patient doesn't know, you can still do it. I remember back when I first started this, and I told our office manager we were going to try this, and she was worried we wouldn't have enough staff. We wouldn't have enough technicians. And what would she do if we got really busy? And I said to her, if you get really behind and you need a technician, just come and knock on the door and call her. I can go on. I know what to do. It's no, you know where there's a technician, and if you really don't let the whole, office fall apart because you need help out there, come get her. It's fine. So are you on time is a very important factor that you need to stay aware of as you work on this. It's not that hard to stay on time. A side advantage of speed is, besides seeing more patients per day, which is a huge advantage, the less time you spend in the clinical side, the more time you spend on the optical. We use a 15-minute slot appointment system, and all of my appointments are the same. They're all 15 minutes no matter what, and we place blockouts where needed. Due to our experience, we place some blockouts in the morning and some in the afternoon and some before lunch and quitting time to help us stay on schedule. It's very efficient because all the slots are the same no matter what kind of exam it is. Office visits, follow-ups, new patient, comprehensive exams, they're all 15 minutes. And I like the 15 minutes because it just, and the blockouts, because it gives me some space on the schedule for emergencies and squeeze-ins. So tips to maintain flow. The silent pager for the doctor is a big one for me. I like that because that way the doctor knows when the next patient's ready. And you may have various ways in your office, but you need to know when the next patient's ready. Sometimes we do things flexible, the order of tests or even the order of patients we see. If you can be a little flexible, you can stay on time. A couple more factors, then we'll get to questions. Delegation in the contact lens practice. This is another area where delegation is helpful, and scribing especially is helpful in contact lens fitting. Because you can simply tell the scribe what lenses you want to put on, and then the doctor goes and sees another patient. And the scribe puts the lenses on, which can take quite a while, takes acuity, does over refraction. The technician could do a lot in contact lens practice. This is the basic flow of a contact lens patient for a comprehensive exam. They're getting a contact lens evaluation. I think all optometrists, show me 10 ODs and I'll show you 10 different ways to do this, but I'll just tell you the way we do it. But the technician does pre-testing with contact lenses off, of course. Most of them require lenses to be off, including topography. We also perform optomap. Contacts are back on in the exam room, and they're on when the doctor comes into the room. Basically, it's a fast exam for the doctor, even though we're doing a contact lens evaluation. We may not even remove the CLs for a refraction. It just depends. It depends if we're going to prescribe new glasses. It depends if we need to. I may just do an over refraction, and that's all. And then the slit lamp exam and the fundus exam. Okay, so wrapping it up, a couple quick things. Become the practice CEO. Schedule yourself for some management days. Solve the problems that are going on in your office. Spend more time on management. You need a real office manager. Hire somebody from within. Promote somebody. Hire a new person. But we need a true office manager. Some key points to train your assistants, your technicians, and some key points for the doctors. Smile is the big one. Sometimes we all have to work on that, but a smile in the exam room by the technician or the doctor, both, is huge. Huge to the patient relationship. Explain the tests as you do them, recommend options, praise the doctor's skill and specialties, call the doctor by name, use the patient's name, end by mentioning the importance and the date of the recall. Those are key things I would teach your staff. For you, for doctors, smile even if you have to work on it, shake hands, make eye contact, talk about non-optometric things, use the patient's name, wash your hands, explain your tests, summarize the exam but keep it brief. Don't give a list of options, recommend what you think is best. Ask, do you have any questions, and thank them as you leave. Finally, the ultimate delegation is bringing in an associate OD. It takes a lot of work to get your practice ready, but if you're booked solid, up to 2 weeks in advance, that's a great time to think about bringing in. And if you're already highly delegated, then it's time to bring in an optometrist. Okay, I ran a little bit over, but we still have a few minutes for questions. and I'll ask Nathan to see if we have any texted in questions, and I'm happy to stay as long as we need to tonight to answer them.
All right. The first question is, what is the average workup time or pretest time for your technicians?
Okay, the average workup time, pretest time, I'd say it averages 15 minutes. There is a range. We have to always consider that range. You know, it depends if it's a simple, young, healthy patient. I could see they could do that in maybe 10 minutes, but I think 15 or maybe even 20 is about average. You know, I don't concern myself very much with pretest time. I do in the big picture because I don't want it to be too long, but I don't try to schedule it at all. And I just sort of take the flow that comes. Some patients are early, some are late, some are on time, some are easy, some are hard, some are young, some are elderly. There's all kinds of things thrown in the mix, and I can't control all of them. What I look at is looking at, do we have enough staff most of the time? Do we have the right amount of staff? And if not, we'll hire more. But I don't, by scheduling, and when I say 15 minutes, I just ignore the pre-test. I'm only looking at a 15-minute doctor time with the patient, and whatever else happens, happens.
Okay. Just to clarify, when you talk about having 3 technicians per doctor, you also may have additional opticians for selling eyewear in the optical. Is that right?
That is right. But you know, the opticians may not be aren't involved in most patients. You know, opticians aren't. Excuse me a second. Opticians are not necessarily involved in the average patient. The super tech could take the patient right through the frame selection process in the optical order. So, but yes, we have 2 full-time, 1 part-time optician on duty who only stays in optical. It doesn't work in the clinic.
Can you talk about the pagers you use and the methods you use for paging your doctors in the practice?
Sure. Yeah. We still use the old-fashioned numeric pagers. They're very inexpensive. We subscribe to them. There aren't very many places left that sell them. I could find the name of the supplier we use. I don't know it off the top of my head. But there, you can Google it and find suppliers of numeric pagers. These happen to also be the devices we use for emergency after-hours paging of a doctor. And we will put that emergency phone number on our voicemail message that patients would hear after hours. And a doctor's on call. But we use it inside the office, and the phone number for each doctor is programmed into our office phone system in the speed dial feature. And so the technician, when they're near the end of their pre-testing, just picks up any phone in the office and hits speed dial 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever doctor they want, and then just waits for the call to connect and then hangs up. So we don't actually leave any kind of a number on the numeric pager. They don't need to. They just need it to vibrate. And it vibrates, and they don't know exactly where they're supposed to go, but they know their next patient's ready. Usually each doctor is working out of 2 rooms, or maybe 3, but they know their rooms that they're using for the day. And when they come out of their room, there's a technician waiting for them, ready to show them where to go next.
Okay.
Just to add on to that, there's a lot of other good ways that could work, including, like restaurants use pagers and Radio Shack sells in-office pagers that don't have to go through a phone system. So that could be another way. And there's also light systems. But I like the pager because it's always with the doctor. No matter where the doctor is, we can find her.
Okay, and a quick question: if a practice's technicians wear scrubs normally, would you think that's inappropriate for walking the patient out to pick out eyewear?
I get that one a lot. And do we sell more eyewear if the optician is dressed in a fashionable attire, or are scrubs okay for optical? I really think they are. We have one of our opticians is a male, and he wears a suit and tie every day. He's fashion-oriented. He's not a tech. He's just an optician, and he's very good at sales. But most of our sales are done by opticians or technicians who wear a scrub-type uniform. It's not quite scrubs. It's a little more dressy than that, but it's a uniform, a top and pants and so on. And we all have this all the same color. It has the Gailmard Eye Center logo. And I think we sell just fine. I sometimes think it's easier to sell when we're healthcare oriented than it is when we're retail oriented. Retail's harder to sell. And so keeping that healthcare image in optical is not all bad. Now, understand the optical looks fantastic. It's merchandised, it's beautiful, there's displays, it's eye designs, it looks fantastic. And so you get that retail feel, but I don't find that it's a problem for the technician to be healthcare oriented. I think it's an advantage because patients give themselves permission to buy when it's a healthcare prescribed item. And they carry that feeling, and believe me, our sales are really good in optical. So I don't think that it matters, and I'm okay with it.
All right. And just a question for clarification, I'll read the whole thing. How long does each super tech take with each exam from beginning to end, including the optical? Because if each doctor sees 3 to 4 patients per hour and there are only 3 techs per doc, that leaves less than an hour from beginning to end. And does the optician actually do the checking out? That's where this practice tends to get hung up. There's a lot there.
Okay. You were breaking up a little bit on part of that, Nathan, but I think I got it. What's the total time from beginning to end? Does the technician have to check out the patient? And the answer is no. The technician, super tech, optician is going to write up the sale on a, we still use a paper super bill, a super bill that is actually like a worksheet. And it also guides us for vision plans into what the prices are for a vision plan and what the rules are and where to put the copay and things like that. All of these forms are available to Prima members. But so they would write up the fees for glasses and for as many pairs of glasses, and then they would take that to the front desk, and one of the front desk staff members would check the patient out, would total it up, would assign whatever is appropriate to insurance, would tell the patient their balance, would collect at least a deposit or the entire amount, and give them the receipt and take care of all that. So we still have a separate front desk staff that's going to check the patient out. The total from beginning to end is, it varies. I don't like to rush anybody in optical, but I would say if they want to take longer, they can take longer. If they want to browse, they can browse. If they're going to take too long and we need the technician to come back, we'll turn them over to an optician. So we're flexible with that. And so yes, but I would say that an hour is probably a pretty good estimate for the total average time if the patient's getting glasses and they get an eye exam. They get a full comprehensive eye exam and glasses. I think an hour is a pretty good guess. A lot of people don't get glasses. Some of them are contact lenses. Some of them are medical. There's a whole mix of things going on.
Okay. And do you delegate contact lens checks?
We do. We're using our technicians for the follow-up checkup. And the technician will do the whole thing if the patient has 20/20 vision and no complaints and does not have a inflamed eye, then the technician could do the whole thing. I think we need to to make contact lens fitting more profitable, we have to reduce the doctor time.
How do you handle staff where an assistant might be reluctant to hire another technician because she feels like training is too much work and she'd rather just see the people herself, see more people herself?
A technician felt that way?
An assistant is the term, but I think a technician didn't want to hire another technician.
Can you say that again, Nathan?
I'm so sorry.
An assistant doesn't want the office
To hire another.
The assistant doesn't want to hire another technician. You know, I'd have a pep talk with that assistant. I would try to get them to see the importance of and the value of hiring an additional staff member. I'd try to get them on board. I would draw them in, and it probably would be a one-on-one talk. But it would be that in order to grow the practice, you can't do it all. This assistant can't see everybody, nor can the doctor do it all. And we need to increase the staff in order to have the potential to grow the practice. So I wouldn't like the thinking. I'm pretty understandable with staff, and I would be supportive, but I would get them to see my point of view, that the big picture is better served. And then I would empathize with, I realize training is not your favorite thing. Training a new employee is difficult. Some people like it and some don't like it. I try to give it to staff members who do enjoy that, and some do. But I would acknowledge when I need someone to train another person, that if it's not their favorite thing, then I tell them how grateful I am for their work in this area that they don't really like to do, but I need them to do it. And so I would be empathetic and yet say, this is what we need, and you're the right person to do this job. So sometimes you have to just be, a leader and tell the staff what we need. And I try to give them the reasons. Usually they will go along. And if you're respectful and supportive, but you have good reasons for why you want to do it, and you're willing to share those reasons, you can bring them around.
Can you talk more about the 2 weeks observation for training someone or a new employee?
I'm not sure where the 2 weeks came from. I don't think I mentioned that, but it probably is about 2 weeks that we would have a new employee go through a training program. Some of it might be involved, watching ECP University videos, which we get through Essilor, and they provide some of the technical training. It kind of depends on what skills the person already has. In our office where we use SuperTechs, we never hardly ever hire anybody that knows all of that. They may come to us with clinical skills. Maybe they worked in an ophthalmology practice, and we're going to train them to be an optician. That's difficult. And so, but we'll do it in phases. And so, in the beginning, we just want them to learn frame selection and prescription. The correct kind of frames and glasses and lenses for certain prescriptions, and PDs and seg heights. And we use, the automated data like VisiOffice or the others. And that's trainable. Now, they're not master opticians, but they can do a frame selection and they can place an order. They can measure PD and seg height, and they can price the product. Pricing the product, working with the vision plans is a big part of that. So, we would have one of our, more advanced technicians teach and we rotate through them, but we would teach the new person to do that. In the early going, the new hire is observing the more senior staff member. And sometimes if we're busy, we're not really training. They're just observing quietly. And that's okay. We have to see the patients first. And so I tell them sometimes, look, if we get busy, don't worry about teaching the new person. Just let her watch you. That's fine. That's enough. Okay. And so, but at other times when we're slower, we will teach. We will let her practice. We will have her do things. Then after about a week of that, they reverse roles. And the new hire begins to do the work on the patient, and the senior staff member is observing the new person. And that's how we do it. We like it that way.
How do you keep track of how long each patient spends in your office, or do you keep track of that?
Occasionally, but it's been a while. Not on a regular basis. I don't keep track. What we do is observe, and we have managers observing, and I do it too when I'm in the office, is observe the balance of things over a period of time. How crazy busy is it? How stressed are we? Are we running behind? We do check in on a timestamp what time every patient checks in and what time they're seen. And so we review how long the wait was. And we don't tolerate a very long wait. Keeping the wait minimal is a huge practice builder. Most optometrists are pretty good at it, but if you're not good at it, it's so easy. Once you can make the conversion and be on time and have a technician ready to start the patient within 5 minutes of their appointment time, assuming they're not late. And then we can get into all that. But mostly you're on time. 90% of the time you're on time within 5 minutes. And then there's not a long internal wait either because the doctor's aware and flexible and not rushed. Once you're at that point, it's a huge practice builder because patients love you for it. They refer, their word of mouth goes crazy. They love you for it. It's a no-charge practice builder, is to just be on time.
Okay. Let's see. Next question. How many patients should one of your super techs be able to see in an hour?
Probably just one. They're going to, especially if they have a frame selection, they're going to be seeing, doing the pre-testing, recording for the doctor, maybe doing some additional tests, dilating the patient, and which requires them to, and we dilate. 95% of comprehensive exams are dilated in our office, fully dilated. And so they bring them back in for the doctor to finish the exam. So probably one.
Okay. Filtering through some that have trickled in. As patients are coming through the office, does the manager assign a patient to each of your techs, or do they just take the next patient as they're available?
Great question. They just take the next patient. We use a system that uses our office phones to page a technician. We page technicians to either come to the front desk and take the next patient, and the business office, the front desk office, is keeping track of who should be next. There's a little chart for each one. Even though we're paperless, we don't keep any paper. We destroy any paper and scan it. But we still have a super bill and an insurance verification benefit thing and a pretest worksheet and a few things that go with the patient. And that keeps track of who's next. And so the front desk, the manager's not needed for that. The front desk staff will page a technician to come to the front desk. We use a code language. And we'll do the same if we need someone in optical because there's someone there to pick up their glasses without an appointment. And we'll just page a technician. The phone paging system, you can only hear it in areas where staff, you don't hear it in the exam rooms, of course. We can control where that is. But the staff can hear it. Now, we do keep track of, we ask staff to initial on the printout schedule which patients they did workups on. And the managers will keep those and, keep a little bit of an eye on, is everybody doing their share? Because it does happen where some staff will just, not respond to the page, knowing that someone else who maybe is a little more, hardworking will get it. So we watch that, and then sometimes we have to have a little chat about it. We keep a little bit of a track of that. On the other hand, we do acknowledge that some of our technicians, they all have side jobs, and some of their secondary jobs are more administrative and require more time. Like some of those clinical technicians order contacts. Not all of them order contacts, but 3 of them do. And they need some time to be at their desk to order lots of contacts and to check contacts in and to, call patients and all that. So we give them a little break on how many workups they do because they have a side job that requires time. Just a little judgment.
All right. And those follow-up contact lens checks, do they go on a doctor's schedule or just does a tech just pick those patients up as they come through?
They go on a technician schedule. We have a provider called technician, and we'll just put them on that schedule. And we also occasionally have patients coming back for OCT or visual fields, and they don't need to see a doctor, and they're on the technician schedule.
How can a smaller practice that maybe only has 2 to 3 full-time equivalent employees, including a front desk person, start to apply these principles in their growth phases?
I would say that a small practice should wait and may not need to do scribing. You have to kind of take everything in phases. But in the early going, the optometrist should do some things that he or she may not want to do eventually, that I wouldn't want him to do eventually. But in the early going, let's take the extreme of a brand new startup practice from scratch. I think that doctor should do some of the frame selections. That doctor should probably do his own pre-testing or her own pre-testing. You see what I mean? So I'm all for getting to this point as fast as you can, but but I don't want to be wasteful. I'm not going to hire more staff so that they can do pre-testing and scribe for me so that I can sit in the back office or and do nothing. We all have to work hard and we all have to carry the ball when we need to. So in the early going and for a 2-employee practice, 3-employee practice, it may not be necessary. I would probably say take longer. You're not going to see 25 patients a day, and you don't need to, and you don't have enough to see. I want you to get to that as soon as you can. Maybe in a couple more years you'll be at that level. You can hire more staff. So I like to see those practices stretch a little bit, but not excessively so that it's wasteful. But do stretch. Begin to delegate a little more. Begin to compress the patients into fewer days. As soon as possible, hire another employee, even if it doesn't seem quite necessary. The goal is to hire more employees. And as soon as you can, go ahead and do it. And eventually you'll get to the higher level things like scribing and high level delegation. Push for that. It's hard to say exactly when.
And just a follow-up on your scheduling, hypothetically, a new exam wants a contact lens exam, wants to be seen today, refuses OptoMap, and how, again, with the 15-minute time slot, that's really not possible. So talk again about how your practice handles those longer patients.
Well, I'd say it is possible because we're, so first of all, we're not above and certainly may have to tell the patient we need to reappoint you. It does happen, and in fact, I encourage it, especially for medical testing. We're going to have, want the patient to come back for medical special procedures and follow-ups and so on. That's fine. And it may happen with contact lenses. Every case is different. But realize if you have enough staff, the total amount of doctor time that you actually spend isn't that much. And we could easily do a brand new contact lens fitting, a complete comprehensive eye exam, and a contact lens fitting all at the same time. And they're all in a 15-minute slot. Well, let's kind of take you through it. The exam itself, a comprehensive eye exam, probably takes 10 minutes of doctor time, maybe even 15, which is all the time I have. But the contact lens fitting is all the work of that is going to be done by a technician while the doctor's doing another patient. And so the doctor has to come back in and just take a look at the lenses. Now you threw in there they refused OptoMap. So, it would depend on whether or not we could do a contact lens fitting and dilate on the same day. I would say we could. I would make, if it's not a multifocal, if it's a multifocal contact lens, we can't dilate. And many times we may have to say, if it's a healthy patient, we may say, let's do your dilation, your dilated fundus exam on one of your contact lens follow-ups. Let's just do the contacts today, and we'll get the dilation in 2 weeks or in a week. And the patients are fine with that, and we are too. They got to come back anyway. So we would do it. I prefer to do the contact lens fitting today and make it fast and easy.
All right.
I answered that.
I think so. If a patient has insurance issues at check-in, will a technician go ahead and start working them up, or will they wait until they're settled?
What do you mean issues? I'm not sure. I don't know if the person can text in what they mean. If a patient has issues at check-in.
Or verifying the benefits.
Oh, okay. We would have known by now. We would have known about their benefits before the appointment. We don't. I mean, I would. Yes, if they're there, we're probably going to see them anyway. At that point, I'm going to see them. But we're really good about verifying their benefits the day the appointment was made. And so it's generally not right. We're not faced with that at that point. It's the front desk's job to confirm the benefits long before the day of the appointment. But otherwise, if we found out something we didn't know, we would, we'd take care of it right there, probably before the patient gets seen by a technician. A manager would talk to them. We'd figure out what we're going to do. I guess I'm being a little general, but I'm not sure that I'd have to have a more specific case to be able to answer it. Hope I gave you enough on that.
I think that addressed it. How long does it take in your practice to get a new super tech up to speed usually?
I would say about 2 weeks, maybe 3, something like that. Now, they're not great. They're not perfect at optical. If they come in optical is harder to train than clinical teching. Clinical tech and scribing is, I think, a little easier to train than a great optician. Optician takes skill and practice a lot. But I think, we can usually get them ready in 2 weeks. They come in with some experience. They've worked in optical. They've worked in ophthalmology. They have some experience. It would take longer, maybe take 3 or 4 weeks. And we have at times hired an employee that had no experience at all. I mean, they did no healthcare and no optical at all. And so, those take 3 or 4 weeks, I'd say.
So even for the optical side, within 4 weeks?
Yeah. Functional enough to do a frame selection and basic dispensing. And we would teach them to turn it over to a higher level optician when needed. I mean, know your limits and know what you can do and what you can't do. It's an ongoing learning process. I mean, that technician who's just barely able to meet our needs in optical will get better. 6 months later, they know a lot more. A year later, they know a lot more. So it's an ongoing process, but we would have them on their own, being able to work on their own in 2 weeks if they had experience and 4 weeks if they didn't.
Okay, and you've mentioned that you use ECP University for some of your training. What other resources do you use for training your new staff?
We don't. I think it's a good idea. I don't have really any others. Everything else is just done within our office. We have a procedure manual, which we give them. We wrote it. And I think that's a good project. It's a good thing to have your staff do for you, is write down what you do in Word, and then just put it all together and edit it. But we have a procedure manual, which we'll give them, and it shows how to do a pretest, how to dispense glasses, how to write up fees. It's got the basics. It's available to Prima members as a guide. But I always think that my procedure manual wouldn't do anybody else that much good. We all run our offices differently and have different procedures. But it may give you the guidelines that you could follow. So we have that. We haven't done enough of it, but I think it's a great thing to videotape your own staff doing procedures and then let a new hire watch those homemade videos. Could be great.
All right, I think I'm going to let the remaining questions contact you directly. So we'll wrap it up here.
We have gone a little long. We're about 20 after. I appreciate everybody hanging around, and I appreciate all the questions a lot.
All right. Well, thank you so much to all of our attendees. And we'll call it a night. This webinar was recorded, so if you want to review it along with the questions or share it with other members of your team, we'll be on the website within a couple of days.
Thank you. Me also, Nathan, let me add that I'm doing another webinar on profitability of vision plans 1 week from tonight. So if anybody has an interest in that, please sign up. We're looking forward to doing it again on a different topic next week.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Gailmard, and good night to everyone else.
Thank you. Thanks, Nathan. Thanks, everybody. Take care.